Good morning and welcome to this week's recruitment discussion with Jump. And this week we're talking about active to advocate, the strategy or blueprint for maximising your client revenue and retention. I can never understand it. We meet lots of new clients every single month, and they can never understand how much money they actually leave on the client's table. So today we're going to look at how we can maximise what you're getting out of your current clients and how you can maximise your client spend. Dave is away in Israel this week on one of his missions, which is really good. Hopefully, he has a safe return. I am in the Radisson Blu Hotel. I'm not sure what Paul called it, but I certainly won't repeat that. And Paul's with us this week, so he's from his abode. So here we go. So, Paul, we're going to jump straight into this and see what's going on. Okay, so looking at recruitment through let's look at it through Porter's 5 forces lens. We've got low barrier to entry. We've got intense rivalry, we've got powerful buyers and multiple alternatives, and the constant threat of in-house recruitment and AI substitutions. Given the brutal competitive reality of the marketplace, how should recruitment leaders fundamentally reposition their value proposition to move from being a supplier of candidates to become something more strategically indispensable for their clients?
I mean, this is a key question. When you look at what's been going on in our industry over a period of time, and you can probably plot this from when we returned after the COVID lockdown, fundamentally, what we've been doing for over 100 years is shifting and changing. It's no longer about providing candidates for jobs, finding jobs for candidates. We have to really broaden our service delivery propositions to clients. And I think the question here is, well, as you've raised it, how do you do that? How do you position yourself to be an organization that can provide more than good quality people? And I think this comes down to something that's fundamental and has always been integral in our industry, and that is you have to build yourself a position of trust with organizations. We know that there are, you've said it, Howard, huge numbers of competitors, and let's look at what competitors mean these days. It's not just other recruitment businesses. We are looking at in-house recruitment teams. We're looking at the AI and the technology that's entered our market, and so on. It's changed. The landscape's changed. Job boards, of course, have been around for some period of time, and of course, social media is all pervading. So to be that indispensable aid, that indispensable partner to a client, you have to find your position of trust, and that comes down to something that has been fading away in our industry for a period of time, and that is constant contact with customers, developing trust, meetings on a regular basis, having people working in your business who are client facing, who are not sitting behind screens all day long flicking through CVs. It comes down to making sure that we're listening to our clients, asking the right questions to determine what it is they need from us, whether they're an SME or a medium-sized business or indeed a large corporation. I think the question is, and I heard it said at a conference where there were some really large RPO organizations, the question you need to be asking your clients, rather than can you give us any jobs or can we help you with filling any roles, is how can we help you to deal with your challenges? What's keeping you awake at night? What problems have you got that we can assist you with? And that broadens the entire conversation in a different way. And I'll come back to that as we go through this.
I think we're going to come back to quite a lot of that as we go through this process, because I thought exactly the same. It's how do we help the client? If we want to become indispensable to the client, we can't just provide candidates. We've got to provide other things to the clients. And that means your data, that means your candidate knowledge, it means innovating our services, but not just short term, but medium term and long term. And it's understanding what their projects are and understanding what they're likely to be going through. And when we go back to that Porter's 5 forces, they're going to have intensive rivalry with their clients. They're going to have substitutes coming into their marketplace. So again, how do we help them? How do we develop them? And how do we do those type of things? And I think once we start to talk the client's language rather than talk recruitment, we seem to get further into the client. We get more in bed with the client. We start to work on that. But that means we've got to do another thing. And I think the thing about becoming indispensable is not just having that relationship with that one point of contact with the client. It's having that indispensable relationship with 5, 6, 7 points of contact with that client. And most of those points of contact have to be the key decision makers. And I think that's one of the things that we don't do very well. We aren't very good at keeping relationships with the key decision makers. We're good at keeping relationships with the recruiter or the person that's pushing out the recruitment need. We're not good at keeping in relationship with those, the power brokers, let's call it, of the business, the real key stakeholders. And I think that is something that we've got to learn to be better at. And if we can leverage those type of relationships, then we tend to get a little bit further or a little bit more in depth into that client and drive that from there. So I think we've got to look at, how we can do that, how we can use our data to do that, how we can use our market knowledge to do that, and how we innovate our services based on what our client needs. And that means we can't have this one size fits all service. It has to be bespoke to each individual client. And there might be only a small degree of variation between those services, but it's a bespoke service to a client, which means that we can sell something slightly different to a client from there. Let's push that question then, because as I alluded to, most recruiters have a strong relationship with hiring managers, but struggle to get access to the C-suite decision makers or procurement. What's the most effective approach that you've seen for elevating conversations beyond operational contacts to stakeholders without sort of alienating your day-to-day sort of person that generally doesn't like you talking to the people above?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and one of the huge errors that we consistently make in our industry is that we form relationships with the end users, which is not a mistake. Obviously, that's good news, but we fail to leverage our position with that end user to gain access to other people in the organization. Now, there are, I'm trying to remember them, 4 types of contacts within an organization. There's your financial user, your financial position. There's the technical purchaser, financial purchaser, technical purchaser. There's your end user, the one we've just made reference to. And then your advocate. Now, the advocate is very often the person that you speak to consistently. And what we fail to do when we develop a great relationship with an end user is we fail to ask that end user to explain to us who else within the organization are people of influence when it comes to recruitment decisions. Now, this can be other people who are buying recruitment services within their business that we don't know, that we have never spoken to. It can be, and very clearly should be, the C-suite. So who is sitting in the boardroom that ultimately are going to be the people that will make decisions around their supplier chain, their recruitment supplier chain. Who sits, if they have an HR department, who sits in the HR division, because we'll rarely be speaking to those people in that sense. So that when it comes to a tender, when we come to an RFI and so forth, we know people already. And what we need to be doing consistently every single time we have a meeting with our end users is ask them for the organization chart. Who else within the organization, both at this location and if they've got other locations, are people that we can work with or that ultimately have some kind of role in the decision process to use recruitment businesses? And here's the key point. You ask your advocate to introduce you. You ask the person who values your service, trusts you, likes you, has been encouraged by what you've done for them, to introduce you to the people of influence. And it's much easier to get those meetings and those contacts by very politely asking for that assistance and support rather than trying to go in cold, where we all know that sort of challenge is an extremely difficult one. And we fail to do those things consistently. And you can see that when Howard, you and I have had enormous experience of going into businesses, looking at current client base and saying, how many of these people use you for permanent staff? And how many of those people that use you for permanent staff use you for contract or temp, or vice versa? And when you match up the two, there are massive differences. So cross-selling, upselling, and so forth. Those opportunities are there, and we can access them if we leverage our relationships correctly. Now, that's not something that you just try and remember. It has to be embedded as a process within your business. It needs to be talked about, monitored, targets set around it, and so forth. Otherwise, people don't ask the questions and can have a tremendous relationship with an end user, but then the end user moves on or gets promoted, and suddenly that becomes a lapsed client.
But I think what you're talking about, advocate, I'm going to use the word promoter, similar sort of thing. If you're on side with your advocate or your promoter, then the question is, how do you make them look good? How do you make them better at their job? How do you make their job successful? How do you make them look good to the people above? The question I always ask when I'm sort of in that position is, why would the C-suite want to meet me? What can I give the C-suite that will be a real life conversation that they would be interested in? Because they're not interested in recruitment. They're not interested in people being recruited, because that's why they're employing the person that you're talking to. That person is in charge of that position or doing that role. So the question is, what do they want to talk about? And that goes back to what we've just talked about, the C-suite. What are they talking about? What are they understanding about the marketplace? And how can you help them make better informed decisions for their company based on the data and the knowledge that you have? So if you can help them optimize their workforce and help them make better informed decisions of what's going on, then all of a sudden you're in a very different place. Now, we don't want the promoter to think that we are taking away from their position or their job or their workload. But if we help the promoter get a better understanding from the C-suite of how hard it is to recruit in the marketplace, then it helps them do their job and it helps them look better. And I think that's the first thing that you'd start to think about. And I've been speaking to quite a number of, internal TA directors and managers. They don't want recruiters to just come and help them. They want recruiters because they need the help. So we can get into those TAs, but then it's getting above to get a better and deeper relationship. And they'll be quite happy to do that if they feel it gives them a benefit and it gives them an advantage. So it's finding out what will make them look good, and then finding out what the clients are actually talking about, so you can go and have that conversation with them. So then your client can make better informed decisions based on the data and knowledge that you have about the marketplace, which will affect their workforce planning. And I think that's a far deeper conversation than most recruiters ever get with anybody within the marketplace. And I think that's where we've got to start to move from.
And Howard, I'll just add another point here that I mentioned earlier, going to see clients regularly. And I'm a great advocate of never extending a period of more than 3 months without having a meeting. I think there should be quarterly reviews at the very least with clients, even small businesses, notably because we live in a hugely changing environment. Things move daily, let alone monthly or quarterly. If you go longer than 12, 13 weeks ish without seeing your client, then you're already out of touch with what's going on in their business. Whether they've won contracts, lost contracts, people have come, people have gone. And when you get together with your client, one of your agenda points, and I emphasize the phrase agenda because there should be an agenda, is to discuss the organization chart. Who's joined, who's left, who got promoted, who retired, what's going on. And this is a perfectly pertinent discussion because it will lead you to other opportunities in the business, and also the opportunity to meet other people through gaining an introduction through your client.
But if you're smart on that, Paul, you can do that through LinkedIn. You can understand that knowledge through LinkedIn, and therefore
that's true as well. Yeah,
you're going to them with that data rather than asking them for that data. Let's move this question on, because I think this is a pertinent question that every recruiter sort of seems to be asking at the moment. We've all seen clients who once saw us as strategic partners and are suddenly treating us sort of like a commodity supplier. When you analyze businesses that successfully win back lapsed clients, what's the conversation or approach that they actually work? And critically, how long should you leave, or how long should a recruitment leader wait after a client goes quiet before attempting to reactivate that client?
Okay, I'm going to start by answering your last question first, because the question you raised was how long should a recruitment leader or recruitment people wait after a client goes quiet before attempting reactivation. I'm going to go back to my 3-month rule. And I think that if you've gone 3 months and you've heard absolutely nothing from the client, there should be a systemic approach. There's a flag that comes up on your system, says phone Howard Greenwood Limited or whoever. Any longer than 3 months, and I think that you already know they've gone somewhere else, quite likely. And if they haven't, fine. At least your mind's at rest. If they've got nothing to offer you, fine, okay, bye. But that's all right. We can live with that. But we keep a contact. One of the reasons that organisations become lapsed clients is that we have terrible silence. We sometimes assist companies and we don't keep in touch with them. We don't have this systemic approach to speaking to clients. And one of the things, back to the same point, that I've always said is that every month recruitment leaders should phone a sample of clients as the owner, as the managing director, as a director, and ask for their opinion about the services we provide or have provided, and look for feedback, because feedback is golden. The feedback we receive should be turned into positive action within the business. And I think it can be random. You can phone 10 different clients if you wish every month. Just imagine if you were doing that. You'd be finding 30 organizations that would give you tremendous feedback. By the way, you should also do that with candidates. Now, you could argue, let's give that to the consultants, and I've got no problem with that, but I think the owners should be doing it, because I think this gives you an understanding of what we do well and how we build on those strengths, what we don't do so well. And back to your porters issue, your first point, which of our competitors are doing a better job than us, and how are they doing that? How would you know that unless you were speaking directly to the end user? So I think this is part and parcel of that answer to that back end question. The point about once or as a strategic partners and have now lapsed comes down to value proposition. It comes down to that. If you were only a supplier of candidates and you didn't, as you said earlier, Howard, make a point of consistently asking, how do we help you? What's keeping you awake at night? What are the challenges we can assist you with? And they only see you as a provider of candidates, and particularly if you are one of multi-suppliers, then inevitably they will stop using you, and that will come about also because we failed to spread our spider's web, as it were, within the organization. Maybe somebody left, maybe somebody got promoted, and so forth. These things all combine. And if you are not looking and consistently curious, asking questions about how we add value to organizations, as you were describing, then inevitably they will see you purely as a supplier of a human being, as people, and they will find other methods or better quality methods to find those people. You have to look at it from a value proposition perspective. And if you don't ask the right questions and you're not doing your research around your competitors and the forces that are occurring, that are becoming evident in your industry, then you're going to fall by the wayside.
So I'm going to make it a little bit more brutal than you then, Paul.
Okay.
Because I'm going to draw the line in the sand when a lapsed client is. If you're in the temp market, if a client hasn't used you for 4 weeks, that client is lapsed. If it's a contract market, then it's 2 months. If it's a perm market, then I'll agree with your 3-month line. But I think if you're leaving a client that's got temp workforces going in for more than 3 months, then that's a problem. And I think the reason why we do this is because we have this vanity metrics. They're always going to use us. They're great. They know me really well. When actually, when we start to dig into relationships, and we've done this an awful lot with lots of our clients, haven't we, Paul? Where we've gone and actually tested the validation of the relationship with the client, and they're going, it's at loyalty, it's at advocacy, okay? And when you boil it down, it's actually just at a basic level of relationship, transactional at best. And therefore, when you have stopped talking to them, they're getting calls every single day from recruitment agencies. They're getting emails every single day from recruitment agencies. They're getting LinkedIn requests every day from recruitment agencies. So you are soon forgotten very, very quickly, irrespective of how good you are. So I think we've got to stop believing our relationship with our client is as solid as we think it is. And we've got to start to think about how we have a more regular contact with our client, whether it be phone, whether it be email, whatever it be. And I think then that goes back to linking to the two questions that we've just answered about knowing our data, knowing our knowledge, and how we become more influential in that client and help them make better informed decisions. And I think that all starts with getting rid of that knowledge or that thought process that that client is a client for life. That client loves us and they'll always use us. They'll never stop going in it. They'll never go anywhere else. Because this year I have heard so many clients talk to me about, oh, I work with these 4 or 5 big clients and they've all stopped using me. Well, why is that? Well, they went quite a bit and I've kept the relationship going. How often do you talk to them? Well, I've talked to them once or twice. What, in 3 to 6 months? Yeah, it's just not enough. You've got to be really there. Think about your own relationship in private. If you're not talking to your friends on a regular basis, then they're no longer friends, are they? Yes, you can pick up after 6 months, 12 months where you left off, but that's not really a friend, is it? Then you look at your personal relationship with your nearest and dearest, you talk to them every single day about certain things. So all the time we've got to think about how we can have that conversation. What conversations can we have with our clients that keep that relationship tight and keep that relationship moving forward?
And just to add to that point, one of the problems for everybody, I think, and we'll all sort of understand this heavy reliance on emailing. Every one of us has got an overflowing inbox of emails that we don't read or we just delete. And if your approach to clients is emailing predominantly, and I think there are a huge number of people that rely on email for contact, I'm afraid to say that's doomed to failure. People don't read emails terribly often. You have to find other methods, and we're going to go back to this point. It's old-fashioned phone calls, team calls, Zoom calls, and God help us, face-to-face meetings is what is required. And you've got to coach and train your people to make certain that these meetings are going on every single week.
I'll give you a little bit of a stat on that, or not a stat, a realistic comment on that. My son's a project manager for Johnson & Johnson, or now Depew, because it's now Depew again. He dropped his phone in the car the other day, and I picked his phone up, and his email tab, 16,000 unopened emails.
There you go.
16,000.
That's outrageous.
That would do my head in. That would properly do my head in. But 16,000 unopened emails. Wow.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I don't know about everyone else. I'm consistently unsubscribing junk email now. As I say, look,
Paul, we don't want to know about that.
Well, but the truth of the matter is that we, as an industry, have become horribly reliant on sending emails or even emails. We've got to. I know there'll be people listening going, yeah, it's easy for you to say, try and get meetings. It's not so easy in reality. I know it's not so easy in reality. I've been doing this 50 odd years. But if you get a client meeting or you get a Teams meeting, here's the thing that you've got to train your people to do. You do not finish that call or that meeting before you've set up the next call or meeting. It's a thing you never stop doing. And if you take my advice, you make the meeting before you leave the building, you're not going to have a problem going forward.
So let's move this question on because we've got lots of questions to ask here. Clients say they want innovation and fresh thinking, but often default to what's familiar or safe to them. How should recruitment leaders balance demonstrating innovation versus delivering the consistent, proven service that the client already trusts, especially when we're trying to expand the client spend?
Listen, I think, and you said it, it's very true. As an industry or as operators within an industry, if you like, we're vessels for information. We gather huge amounts of information as organizations. We have access to salaries. We speak to candidates every single day. Lots of people listening will produce salary surveys or assist clients with salaries and benefits advice and so forth. But it goes beyond that, because our industry means that we should be every day looking at innovations, what's going on in our market, what's happening, and in particular, very importantly, what's happening in the specific sectors that we specialize in. We are in a tremendous position to gather information daily, weekly, monthly, annually from the people we talk to, from the people that work in businesses to the people that own businesses. So we have this access to information that if you're a solitary business, you can't easily obtain yourself. Now, what do we do with that information? Does it just sit in the CRM? Does it sit in the brains of the people that work with us? What are we doing with it? How do we gather it? And what do we use? When we do gather it, what do we do with it? I think clients are interested in knowledge and information we can provide to them, but it comes back to the other point. If you're talking innovation, we should be talking to our clients about what has been working elsewhere with other clients of ours. So perhaps we've innovated with other clients. We have case studies to share. We did this for this client, it worked brilliantly. We set up that for another client, it worked brilliantly. I was thinking of you, I think it would work very well with you, etc., etc. Or I know that this new innovation is coming in our direction, perhaps we should talk about it. This comes back to the very point we've been making. If you're deep and you've got a relationship with your client, these confidential questions and answers around how do we improve your manpower management, your recruitment processes, will ultimately flush out ideas already proven in some cases, or opportunities for us to innovate, be creative, and come back with solutions to their challenges. But just asking for roles to fill and only communicating around the interview process or the provision of contract and temporary staff isn't going to get you the answers to how do we innovate with our clients. We have to be, and we've said it 100,000 times, we have to do what it says on the side of the tin. We have to be consultants. We have to consult. It's not just about sending in candidates.
Well, I think then we've got to do one thing. We've got to change how we view our client. And what we see our client is a rolling 30-day commodity. And we sign rolling 30-day contracts with our clients. That's most of our contracts that we have, that you can exit the contract within 30 days. That's most of the contracts that we have. So if you want to really innovate with a client, then you need to be closer to the client and therefore understand their workforce needs, what roles are critical, what roles are reoccurring, what new roles they're going to have up, what projects are coming on. But if the client wants to really work with you and innovate with you, why not get them to sign a 12-month agreement, a 24-month agreement, a 36-month agreement? So they're committing to you and you're committing to them. And therefore, when you're innovating, because I think we're scared to innovate because we're going to put all of that into a client. What happens if they go then use to other recruitment agencies, give that to other agencies? We're worried about that. But when seem to forget that it's in our hands, based on our service delivery and our capability and capacity to service the client, to actually go and ask for longer contracts, better contracts, contracts that would work better for you and better for them, rather than this, rolling 30-day flexible contract, which allows them to use any other recruitment agency. Why not block the other recruitment agencies out? But to do that, you've got to have a really good service in the first place, and therefore understanding how you can innovate is more important. And I think we've got to look at those sort of things constantly and drive those things, because if we don't, then we are then just one of a number of clients that supply them, and somewhere one of them will come and sell them a solution that will exclude you out of the process.
Howard, this also comes down to the quality of people we engage in our businesses. Have we got people capable of asking the right questions, who are confident enough to go and want to go and sit down with clients and start asking intelligent questions and ask in-depth questions and come back and sit down with the team and innovate and be creative and go back and so forth? Because although I know there are some hugely talented people in our industry, I'm sure, and I could give you examples right now of people that we have working as consultants who are not up to the job, quite, to be blunt, as you said, to be brutal.
So if you think about then let's add another layer into that. It's not just about the quality of your consultant that's delivering the service. It's about the quality of the candidate that you supply to the client. We've just done 4 sessions on business development, market mapping the candidate, market mapping the client, and then technically how you can market map. Okay, that is critical. If you have your hand on the market knowledge of the best candidates in the marketplace, where they sit, where they go, etc., That's a whole different level to what we normally get. Let me go and find the candidate for you. If I already know where the candidates are and I already know who the candidates that can do that job, that's a whole different ballgame.
And you're right about that. But again, it's down to the quality of the individuals that you engage.
But it's also down to the quality of data that you give that individual to work from there. So let's think about that then. Recruitment agencies sit on a gold mine of market intelligence, salary benchmarks, predictive workforce analytics, talent mapping, succession planning insight, talent availability, competitive to hiring patterns. The list goes on and on. Yet most of us give this away for free or don't package it at all. So how should a recruitment leader be productizing or monetizing their market knowledge and data as a separate revenue stream that deepens the client dependency and increases our wallet share?
Okay, so I think you're right. I think we give that information away freely too often, and so because it's given for free, we don't charge for it. It's not seen as having high value. I think this comes down to pricing models. I think it also comes down to gaining exclusivity and retained opportunities with businesses. You were talking earlier about contract lengths, for example. I mean, I'd be perfectly comfortable bundling in a whole range of things you described for my client if I was able to develop an exclusive agreement with that organization. I'm perfectly comfortable providing a whole range of added value services because I'm the only game in town. More than happy to do that. Equally, I think it comes down to making sure that if we're offering something that adds value, that we, as you said, we consider charging for it. Now, that comes down to how we pitch these things to customers, but it also comes down to understanding where those gaps are with our clients. What doesn't work particularly well for the client? Where do things go wrong? How do we figure out what we could do to make it a better service? Now, as I said, I'm flexible around the pricing model. If I'm getting exclusive opportunities, I'll happily provide additional services. But if I'm a multi-supplier, then I'm going to be starting to talk about charging extra for that. But I've got to be able to convince the client that paying extra for those services will add amazing value to the business. And again, that isn't going to be done through the distribution of emails or glossy brochures. This is going to be done because we've got down to the nitty-gritty, sitting down with clients and having very deep conversations about what we can do to improve their processes.
And nor is it going to be done at the line that gives the recruitment jobs out. It's the lines above that that are going to see this. And I think, what we see as a free or a giveaway, what does the client see as essential to them or critical for them to make better informed decisions? And it's that intelligence and then how we wrap that intelligence up in a package that becomes important. And you're right. That means if we then start to look at our client value propositions and what we're selling to clients, contingency. Why are we giving a contingency client that, uses us occasionally, uses with every other recruitment agency in the world? Why are we giving them all the important data? Maybe an exclusive client, if they're going exclusive, we could give a little bit more data. A retained client, we give a lot more data. Someone who's signed a talent advisory agreement where we're working with them for 2 or 3 years, we're giving them extraordinary amounts of data so they can make huge informed decisions based on the market intelligence that we have. But that's not just market intelligence about the candidates in the marketplace. It's also about what their competitors are doing and all those type of things. So I think we've got to understand what we think is just free data that we can get because we're getting all that information from candidates and other clients. We should be thinking about what essential data does our clients need to make a better informed decisions at board level when they're looking at strategic development of their business, they're looking at productizing their business, etc. And we tend not to think about it like that. We only think about it from a recruitment and recruiting staff, where we've got so much more data than that we can actually give our clients. And I think that's the bit we start to package up. That's the thing we start to sort of market ourselves out. And then, as you keep saying, that means we are then a true consultant, not, as I keep calling it, we're not a consultant.
Oh, very good, Howard.
Very good. I do like a hyphen in the odd word here and there. but that's what we think. We're not being consultative enough because we only think we can consult about recruitment when we've got so much more. We're the specialists in the marketplace. We're especially on the market knowledge. There's very few industries like ours that get so much data put into us that we can make huge comments about a marketplace based on the data of people, of what they're actually talking about and what they're actually doing it, because we're talking to those people all the day. So I think if we find out what the client believes is essential, they're the things that we should start to sort of market and commoditize and drive out. Okay, so there are critical differences between being a recruitment consultant who fills jobs and a strategic talent advisor who influences workforce planning, employer brand, competitive position, etc. What specific capabilities, deliverables, and behavioral changes are required to make this transition? And how do you charge for it without clients expecting it as part of the standard service, especially when a client wants to reduce spend because they can get it from a competitor for cheaper?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Let's talk about technology for a minute, because technology has infiltrated every industry. It's infiltrated ours. It's becoming more and more sophisticated, and lots of it pretty reasonably priced these days. What does it do for us? Well, it enables us to get rid of some of the more dull, grind type responsibilities that eat up huge amounts of time in the course of a week. We can get it to do stuff for us. For example, CV sourcing, CV manipulation and reinvention, and so forth, that people take a lot of time to do, that technology can do in a fraction of a second. Look at ChatGPT, what it can do in 3 seconds. So we need to look at how do we create more time for ourselves, and I think a lot of answers are already out there. That releases us to do a lot more. It gives us the time to be spending talking to customers. And when you talk about behavioral changes and the skill sets, we have to have people in our organizations, customer facing people, who are genuinely curious about the clients that they work with, genuinely interested in assisting them. It's not fake, it's authentic, that they're driven by helping out their customers to produce better results, providing them, as you said earlier, with more time, better solutions. You have to have passionate people. Passion always sells. And you need people with high levels of emotional intelligence, active listeners, great communicators, and so on. Now, most of the recruitment people listening to us today, Howard, in fact, all of the people that are listening to us right now have all of those attributes in abundance. I'd like to think, I hope, that most of the people working for the people listening today have those attributes in abundance. These things, EQ, are not things you can be taught at school or university. You don't get a degree in it. These are natural abilities that can be developed. If we haven't got those people with those natural abilities, then we need to find them. And if you have people that are scared to pick up the phone, scared to go and sit in front of clients, don't want to do those things, I'm afraid they have a limited shelf life with you if you are looking at them as being true consultants, as you said, Howard. You can't manufacture those behaviors. You have to have people that have the ability and want to demonstrate those behaviors. And for those of us that have been in the industry all these years, and I can see who's listening today, there are lots of people with huge amounts of experience, many of whom I know, they have massively high emotional intelligence and love spending time with people. It's what they enjoy doing the most. Look around you, understand who has those abilities, how do we develop them further? And for those people that don't have those abilities, perhaps there are roles they can fulfill in your business, but customer facing isn't one of them. And over the next 18 months to 3 years, they will become redundant, I'm afraid, within your organizations, unless you can find other roles for them that are not customer facing.
So I'm going to work on the word strategic talent advisor or talent partner who influences workforce planning. The last question we've just talked about is how do you use all that market intelligence? And I'm going to say we need to stop using AI to write emails and do the basic things that we use AI for. Okay. If I'm looking at a system, let's say I'm looking at Vincere, Bullhorn, whatever it be. Okay. I want my AI to be able to infiltrate that system and find all the data and all the information that I want. So then that can produce for me the data that I need, and then package it in a way that I can then push it out to clients or candidates, etc. I want to be able to then use my AI to do deep searches into the client marketplace. So I can use that data and that intelligence with my client, and I can educate my consultants to then have those deeper conversations with my clients. And yet we don't use AI in that way. We use AI to write an email. We use AI to automate a process, okay, when actually that automation is probably already there. So I think we need to start to use the tools that we have to extract the information that we get. Otherwise, our CRM just becomes a depository of information that we never use. And therefore, all that opportunity is wasted. And we've been saying for the last 3 or 4 years now that, data is the new oil, it's the new liquid gold, etc. And yet we still haven't started to work out how to harvest that properly and use that. So if you want to go from being just a job filler to being a strategic talent advisor, you've got to advise strategically about what's happening in the marketplace. And therefore, you've got to gather that knowledge and gather that information and then package it in a way that you can give it to a client, that a client sees the value in it. And that client then is going to probably the C-suite of that client. So we're now back into Porter's five forces. The power brokers in that client, they're the ones that need that information, but we're still speaking to the person that is dealing with the recruitment. And I think we've got to change that, and that becomes a real part. So let's use AI for what it's worth. So if you've got a system, I'll be going away and speaking to the person that runs that system, has built that system. What AI are you doing to help me develop more information out of the things that I've done, all the notes that I put on the system, all the fields that I fill in the system, etc. How can I drag all of that out of the system and then create something that is worth money?
Yep.
I think that's the bit. So last question, and this is always going to be an interesting question as well. Okay. If a recruitment leader walked out of this webinar today and had to choose one immediate action to implement with their current client base, what would have the biggest impact on revenue within the next 90 days? And what would you tell them to do and why?
I think it's pretty simple. I think, and I said it earlier, go away, phone 2 to 3 clients every day, that you can spread that across every single one of your consultants, and have conversations with those clients around their plans for the next 3 to 6 months. Ideally, try to get meetings, if not Teams, Zoom meetings. Don't ask for business in the sense of, hello, can I help you with any roles? Get a bit deeper into what's going on in their companies, and importantly, how they see your service, how they see the competitors, how do we compare, what do we do well, what can we improve, what are other people doing better than us? Go ask those questions and then regroup and try and work out how you can develop your strengths further as a business, what innovative ideas you can come up with to provide added value services to your customers, and importantly, establish where your weaknesses are and look to see what you can do to improve those. This is the perfect time of the year to do that, leading up to the new year. It's great time, November, December, January, are great months to be having those strategic conversations. I would urge everybody listening to galvanize their people and to make certain that they're doing it too. Go have conversations with your clients. Don't say, I'm calling to see if you've got roles. Have deeper conversations and see what emerges from that. Regroup every week and compare notes.
Depending on the size of the agency, I would do something similar. So I would take every consultant and look at their top 15 clients by priority. I would then try and understand who I know in that client. So the buying point to the decision makers to the stakeholders. Okay. And I'd map out who I had conversations with. The questions I then want to ask is when I go back to my advocate or my promoter is who can they introduce me to? Can they introduce me to another revenue stream, or can they introduce me to a stakeholder where I could sell a better service to? And I would have over the next 90 days, I want to go and meet those people. And I want to have meetings. So if you've got 15, 20 clients, okay, recruiters, then they all have 10, 15 clients. We should be going out and having that many meetings, because it's when you meet face to face, when you discover so much more, that's when sales start to happen. That's when growth starts to happen, when you know more and more about the client. But if you're sat there on a revenue stream and not tapping into it because you don't know it's there, that's because you're only harvesting one information out of that candidate, that promoter, but that promoter is actually only a buyer. They're not promoting you to anywhere else in the business. So I would be starting to work on the people that I have in the business who are buyers or promoters, grow a deeper relationship, visit them, and who else can they introduce me to? Now, if I can create that data from looking at LinkedIn profiling or market mapping, I don't have to ask the candidate, the client for that. I can go, can you introduce me to this person? Can you introduce me to Paul Jacobs? Can you introduce me to Dave Pye? Let's go and start to use that intelligence and start to get deeper into every single client that I've got. That's an easy way to win business. Then I'd start to plan who all of my competitors are, as in competitors to that client, because they're a second revenue stream that I should be trying to develop. And if we're not developing those revenue streams, then we're never going to grow our business. And I think that's about using your market intelligence and your market knowledge. So I think it's all about market intelligence, market knowledge from there. Paul, thank you very much. It's been, as always, an interesting conversation when we talk about these things. Next week, we're going to develop a new webinar. We're going to have a series of 2 for the next week, because then on the 3rd of December, we've got a financial advisor coming in and an insurance advisor to come and talk about what Rachel from accounts has done with which is going to be very interesting, but how we can safeguard our business and how we can maximize our business from the back office, not just the front office. And I think that's going to be a very interesting conversation, because we always talk very often about, there's 2 sides to every coin that comes into our business. The top side is all about gross profit that comes from the client, and when you turn it over, the operational side of the business, how can we maximize that coin? And I think there's going to be lots of things we're going to maybe have to change with the laws that are already coming in, and the things that Rachel from accounts might change, which might be very, very draconian for us. So, ladies and gents, thanks for your time. It's been much appreciated. Paul, thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
I'll let you get back to your day of leisure, and I will speak to you all again next week. Catch you later. Bye.
Bye.